Welcome back to the face-to-face regional championship in Calgary, Alberta. I am Johnny Gutman. Myself and the face of Canadian Magic, Liam Kane, will be taking you home today. We get lovely last round of Swiss and top eight. And the last round situation is pretty interesting. Liam, what's going on here?
We have had the top 5 tables of this tournament draw. Now, remember, we're going to play after this round. We're going to cut to top 8 and we'll cover the top 8 matches, and that's going to be super exciting. But to start, Pro Tour invites are going to the entire top 12. So players are very interested in securing a top 12 spot. And so we've had the top 5 tables draw. That means we're looking at two 10-3s who are playing a direct win and in. Win this match, you're in the top 8, probably as first or second seed. Lose this match, well, you still might get a nice promo, but you will not be making the top 8 or getting a Pro Tour invite. So this match is the biggest stakes one of the entire tournament that we've seen so far. And Riley playing Izzet Affinity has really started off with a bang.
Yeah, this is basically, apart from that Kappa Cannoneer, which hasn't hit the table yet, but it is in the hand that we can see Riley's on the play and has put 7 permanents onto the board. And the Boros Energy deck, it does a lot of powerful things, but I don't know if it's doing anything as powerful as that. And this Keith on the draw here is already really at the back foot, taking a look at what's going on here.
Yeah, is there a better possible start that you've seen from an Izzet Affinity deck?
You have to, the only thing that could have made Riley start better would be one more 0 as opposed to the Vexing Bauble, and that would enable the Kappa Cannoneer to hit the board on turn 1. But the turn tier Kappa Cannoneer is fantastic, and Riley's got to be loving the spot that he's in right now against just a lone Guide of Souls.
I mean, Guide of Souls, that is the best way for Keith to start trying to get back into this game, but with a Kappa immediately coming down, and he doesn't know that he has the Kappa, but this has to be the worst nightmare because 3 drone tokens, Guide of Souls can outpower this, but 5/5, that's going to be very difficult.
And the hits keep coming. That's a Tamiyo that pumps out more artifacts, but also just more cards for Riley that he's going to be able to slam onto the table. From Keith's spot, the main way that the Boros Energy deck can beat these powerful fast affinity starts need to involve at least one, but probably 2 Ocelot Prides is going to be the only way that Keith can make a board that's gaining enough life to keep him alive through this unblockable Kappa Cannoneer. It's not looking good.
And we could hope that, or he could hope that maybe the Izzet Affinity deck would run out of artifacts, unlikely, but a prayer. But with that Tamiyo in play, as it attacks, creates a clue token and guarantees that every single combat, the Kappa Cannoneer will not only be growing, but never be able to be blocked.
Yeah, it's looking tough. Looking at Keith's hand, we can see a Flayed, which is another way you can gain some life, but seeing that Tormod's Crypt, it doesn't look to be the most effective plan. I see what looks like a Lightning Bolt as well in his hand. Normally nice cards, and maybe Lightning Bolt on Tamiyo is how you can cut off the stream of artifacts, but the spot is looking dark for the Canadian on Boros Energy, or the Torontonian on Boros Energy, and just passing back, leaving that 1 mana up, means no other 1-drop is really going to put him in a squeeze.
Yeah, and Ocelot Pride was 100% necessary to have any hope of this game. No Wrath of the Skies in his side in the deck yet. This is game 1. Even a Wrath of Skies would not save him in this spot.
Yeah, and Riley's just showing that the powerful cards are just going to keep on coming. Urza's Saga is looking just excellent in case Keith had some ability to deal with what's going on. It's just more and more powerful threats. Riley knows what's going on. This Affinity deck sacks the Vexing Bauble. No 0s from the Boros deck, and you can see that Riley's got at least 1, maybe 2 0s in hand, and looking to put some powerful things. Seems like Riley is going to put that Pinnacle Emissary in play, would be my assumption. It's kind of off the screen, but it's still in that warp zone.
Yeah, and a Mishra's Bauble spotted also in hand, so if there's a mana source, then yes, as we see it was a Mox Opal drawn off the Vexing Bauble, so Mox Opal Legend Rule will trigger the Kappa Cannoneer and allow Riley to get up to 3 mana to put that Pinnacle Emissary into play and create another drone token this turn.
Yeah, that Kappa Cannoneer is going to be getting 5 counters on it, or Riley Disciplined holds back the Mishra's Bauble. But if you're Keith, it's you're going to untap on your third turn, but it's I don't see a world in which he's seeing a fourth.
No, that even without an artifact drawn, that Urza Saga would be able to create a construct that could continue to give the Kappa unblockable. But I like the place being safe, holding it to make sure that this Kappa will trigger every single turn. And Keith at this point has no moves.
Yeah, he's inspecting the hand, but it feels like a formality here. Looks like Riley's gonna take down game one and look to cement his spot as Liam said in the with all these people drawing, the winner of this match is going to be the first or the second seed in top eight, and that can really, as you look forward, obviously you don't want to catch your chickens before they hatch, but it's a lot in a format like Modern. You can see what Riley's able to do on the play. It's one of those formats that getting that play draw disparity, no die rolls, just knowing that you're going to guarantee get those spots is a really great place to be.
Yeah, especially for a deck like the Affinity deck. I mean, it matters for all of them, but if there had to be one deck that you would be very confident with going first, it has to be uh, this explosive artifact deck.
As Keith fetches up a planes, you got to think the only way to stay alive, maybe Guide of Souls #2, Double Ocelot Pride, maybe keeps him alive, but you can look at the hand and those cards are not there.
Yeah, if he didn't have it the turn before, he won't have Double Ocelot Pride now. And the Flage will take down the Pinnacle Emissary, stem the bleeding from the drones, gain 3 life plus 1 more off the Guide of Souls. But again, that Kappa Cannoneer now 1, 2, 3. It's 7 plus 3 is 10 power on board. That will be enough to take down Keith with the 2 more artifacts that Riley will be able to put into play at the very least on this turn.
Yeah, and Keith studying at the Reed Duke School of Magic, never conceding, but at some point your life total hits 0 and you get to pick up your cards, and now we're going to look towards the sideboard.
Yeah, Keith will be very happy to move on from that game, be on the play for game 2, and have some powerful tools that can improve the matchup. Riley, even with that Vexing Bauble in hand, not the kind of card you want against Boros Energy usually, but that's the power of the Izzet Affinity deck, is that it gets to play all these narrow targeted hate artifacts, and even when they are not the right matchup for them, they still do something powerful, turboing out that Kappa Cannoneer and creating a drone trigger off of the Pinnacle Emissary.
And now taking a look at we can kind of watch Riley sideboarding. We're seeing that looks like 2 Unholy Heats are coming in along with a Whip Flare. And that's it. Looks about it as the appealing cards. Keith is prepared for this matchup. You saw how that game 1 goes. It's not a pretty game 1. It doesn't always go that bad, but you're definitely playing it from the back foot. But post board, Keith has 2 Wrath Disguise, 1 Meltdown, 2 Wear Tears. Keith's got a lot of answers here. What are the cards that you're looking to take out if you're Keith Capstick here, trying to battle back from being down 1-0 in this very important win and end?
Well, if we notice in the Izzet Affinity sideboard, there are the 2 Blood Moons, and so Affinity being a Blood Moon deck itself, especially with the new interaction with Urza Saga, not so new at this point, but those Blood Moons in his main deck will be exiting very quickly. It's what follows after that is a little bit difficult. The Thraben Charm has use destroying Urza Saga, but it might be a little bit of an expensive as an answer to the other plays. Of note, there are no weapons manufacturing in Riley's deck, and therefore the ability of Thraben Charm to answer weapons manufacturing won't be relevant in this matchup. So perhaps Keith would like to trim some of those for better reactive. Would you have the same approach?
Yeah, another thing you can look at is sometimes your cards like Galvanic Discharge, you can see Keith has that one of Lightning Bolt. These are cards that aren't always amazing in Affinity. They hit the Pinnacle Emissary, but not much else. Against Riley's deck, they look fantastic. 4 copies of Emery, 4 copies of Pinnacle Emissary, 2 copies of Tameo. These are premium threats that are really threatened to take over the game if left unchecked, and that makes cards that you might be more open to cutting, like those Lightning Bolts and Galvanic Discharge in the matchup, something that really is not appealing.
Yeah, this is actually quite a different take on the Affinity deck than we've seen from some of the other people. Leaning into those early legends, 4 copies of Emery and 2 Tameo, as you mentioned, that enables to put in 2 Mox Amber is into his deck. The most broken Affinity draws do involve Mox Opal, and so being able to sometimes get access to even more free additional mana really adds to the explosiveness of this deck while giving it that lasting staying power that Tameo and Emery can do when combined with Mishra's Bauble to draw extra cards turn after turn.
I know we talked about how kind of scary these rats are out of the Boros Energy deck, right? 2 Wrath Disguise and a Meltdown. Do you think part of the reason that Riley has chosen to go for this, more legends based affinity deck is that he's added a bunch of different threats that aren't weak to these rats. Maybe having Emery, having Tameo allows you to play through Meltdown, play through Wrath Skies, and rebuild in a more effective way. And you can have these powerful boards that aren't just opening yourself up to getting Wrath Skies.
Absolutely, and we see he has the 4 main deck Metallic Rebuke to support this plan. That's kind of a card that would be pretty poor game 1 against Boros Energy, but after they add these Wrathless guys to the deck, it might be something that he wants to leave in his deck just for it to have that answer. And the traditional way of attacking the Wrathless guys was with the weapons manufacturing, creating enough munitions and putting life total pressure that they can't cast it. But this is a different approach, and it could prove to be even more fruitful, as that weapons manufacturing only works when maybe on your most explosive draws and still leaves you vulnerable otherwise. Whereas Emery being 3 mana, even though you can cast it for 1, is quite a bit more difficult for some of the Wrath of the Skies decks to cast. Now, Boros Energy, of course, is the best deck in Modern at producing that additional energy. So just because only 2 mana is spent on a Wrath of the Skies doesn't mean that only zeros will be destroyed from the Boros Energy deck, whereas maybe in some other decks, such as the Jeskai Blink or the Zoo deck that also sideboarded a Wrath of the Skies, they would have to pay significantly more mana.
Looks like here we will be jumping right into it. Riley Hicks 1 game away from making the top 8. Keith back against the wall here, looking at a 7 that we can see a Wear Tear and a Galvanic Discharge, some lands, Seasoned Pyromancer. Doesn't look to be the most explosive start. Riley takes one quick look at his and sends it back.
Yeah, it's difficult out of the Boros Energy side on the mulligans to know what the right approach is against Affinity. I know Keith has tested this matchup quite a lot. He's very practiced with the Boros Energy deck. But you have the mix of these hate cards that are your best reactive spells, but if he doesn't do something powerful and put enough creatures onto the board early, then even a key interactive spell or two, well, won't be able to stop the Affinity deck.
And I think that is the power of this is an affinity deck. It has these incredibly powerful starts where you vomit your hand turn 1, but can also play this grindy game. It has a bunch of 2-for-1s. It has powerful value engines. Urza's Saga itself is actively a game plan in a box, so it can attack from these different angles, and your opponent doesn't know which half of the deck you drew. And sometimes your answers, even though they look so powerful, you might have the meltdown, but there's an Emery in play, and who cares if you destroy the artifacts so they can come right back.
Exactly,
And
and Riley's really leaned into this grindy plan with the 4 Thoughtcast as well that we missed when looking at the deck list, and that really allows him to grind through interaction um, without too much trouble. Even though in game 1 he just had the most explosive, and no amount of interaction would be able to stop it. And again, he looks to have quite an explosive hand, leading with Pinnacle Emissary. But Keith has a response to this.
yeah, and you can see right here, we saw that Galvanic discharging Keith's hands, already showing how different this matchup plays play draw. Keith didn't even have a chance to get rid of the Pinnacle Emissary on the draw, and there were 3 1/1s in play before Keith even saw his first draw step. But now he has the ability to take off that Pinnacle Emissary with only 1 drone coming into play. Still a powerful effect, and 1 drone's not nothing. But you got to think you're much happier with how this first turn's going compared to the last one. You felt like you were in basically a disastrous spot after turn 1.
Yeah, absolutely. Urza Saga and another land in hand, a Mishra's Bauble and a Metallic Rebuke, it looks like, for Riley. So no Kappa Cannoneer, but even if he had one, it would have been significantly slowed down. We're going to see Riley probably lean into the Urza Saga in order to produce some power next turn. But as we know, Keith has the Wear Tear already, and that could be deployed on turn 3, maybe as a 2-for-1.
And you're looking at Keith's hand, you can see two key cards here. One is that Wear Tear we talked about as a 2-for-1, but the other one is this Voice of Victory. We see that Riley has a Metallic Rebuke in hand, and normally is the best way to protect your Urza Saga from a Wear Tear or other, Wrath of Skies artifact destruction type effect. But here, Keith has what feels like a pretty powerful 1-2 punch into going Voice of Victory into Wear Tear, that your opponent has no option, can't cast spells on your turn, and that could look to be a really powerful play for Keith.
Absolutely. Voice of Victory. What an impressive card. The only non-Modern Horizons creature to make it into the Boros Energy deck.
And that is something that is a pretty telling statement for how powerful it is. You see the cards they pump out in Modern Horizons, Voice of Victory, powerful fair card, powerful combo card, triggers Guide of Souls, makes extra tokens but also Pride. It really does it all, and you can see why it's a 2 of in most copies of Boros Energy.
Yeah, it really, that card has impressed me. I first looked at the Boros Energy list, and when Voice of Victory first came out, people were trying it, and it's like, what? This must be so weak. Modern is such a powerful format, but it really does everything the deck wants to do here. And we see that drone attacking because Riley knows that Metallic Rebuke not doing much else as he passes the turn on turn 2.
And now you're looking at Keith, and just one land allows the double Wear Tear, and that's a very powerful start. But we'll see what he has to follow up this good turn 2 play of Voice of Victory. I'm not sure I see the land in Keith's hand, but maybe
But
we're missing something.
he won't need usually he would want, when given the choice, to use both modes on and he does have an Arena of Glory plus another Arid Mesa, it looks like, in his hand, and he does choose to use the both modes of the Wear Tear. If he had maybe some more creatures in his hand, he could choose to ignore the drone token, save 2 mana, and deploy another threat, but it does look like his hand is mostly reactive after that, so he will extract the maximum value from the Wear Tear.
And that's a tough spot for Riley Hicks, getting your land destroyed, the only drone that came with, and it seems just like it's going to be a Appland and a Mishra's Bauble and saying the turn back. This Metallic Rebuke, a card we talked about, is how important it is to protect your stuff from the Wrath, but the Voice of Victory on the play has just completely nullified it.
Yeah, really, really good start. And this is part of the downside of the Affinity deck. We see it have that explosive game 1 win that's almost unbeatable, and then in the post board, things get more difficult. So Riley is very happy that he did take that game 1, as without taking game 1, it would be tough to defeat all of the options that Boros Energy gets after sideboarding.
Yeah, we saw that Galvanic Discharge line up perfectly against kind of Riley's plan A, Wear Tear for the plan B. The Affinity deck does some powerful stuff, but at the end of the day, there's only so many plans it can pump out, and that's a second Voice of Victory with another Seasoned Pyromancer likely coming next turn with a Thraben Charm in hand. It does feel like Keith is pretty insulated from all sorts of things.
So Thraben Charm did remain in the deck, and we might see it come down to destroy this Pinnacle Emissary very soon.
Yeah, not kind of the expectation for what it's going to do in your deck. You're normally looking at it as, okay, this is a way to deal with Urza Saga, but it's a powerful card with a lot of modes, and it's going to be dealing 4 damage to the Pinnacle Emissary. Notably, Mox Opal still on the stack. Metallic Rebuke cannot be cast here, even though it's Riley's turn.
Yeah, that is one of the key things of Voice of Victory, is that it does still allow the counter magic to be used to protect your own cards. And Keith, thinking on this fetch, maybe choosing between Sacred Foundry or Plains, he opts for the Plains, and he will deploy this Thraben Charm in short order. No interaction that from Riley that could, potentially remove one of the Voice of Victory in response and allow the Pinnacle Emissary to live. That card does not exist in his deck list.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Keith has made the right play of doing it with the Mox Opal on the stack. That's why Metallic Rebuke cannot be cast. And a bit of a slip up from Riley Keith now has a really good read on the Metallic Rebuke being in hand.
Yeah,
And
even before the drone came into play, also.
so, yeah, just that's tight play from Keith. And, it looks like he's got one card left in hand. But if you have one card left in hand, there's no card you'd rather in the Boros Energy deck than Seasoned Pyromancer.
Oh,
And it
absolutely.
looking like a very powerful follow up, maybe a consideration of an exert from the. There you go, just getting that extra 2 damage in. Keith understands how important it is to close the game out when your opponent's stumbling, and is willing and wants to get that 2 more damage.
Yeah, a pair of lands drawn off the Seasoned Pyromancer, not what he was looking for. But if he had not drawn the Marsh Flats, it would have been kind of an interesting decision on which mana he leaves available to himself afterwards, whether it's a white mana or a red. Oh, sorry, because he fetched double planes, that then his only option would be to leave that planes remaining after. But that's probably what he was thinking about when choosing between the planes and the Sacred Foundry on the turn before, on Riley's turn before, thinking about which mana he wanted to have left up after casting the Seasoned Pyromancer. So he really was a step ahead, as it was pretty obvious that he was going to cast a Thraben Charm, but still took the time to think and make sure that he set himself up in the best position for the next turn.
And, the Seasoned Pyro's answer was excellent, but and that's it. Wow, Riley with a handful of nothing. We can see the problem with the Affinity deck when those power cards get answered, and that is a quick game 2 for Keith Capstick, forcing a third game in this incredibly important win end.
Yeah, it all will come down to one game for Keith and Riley, and it couldn't be higher stakes for them.
Yeah, this is, sometimes you get these, it looks like we do have another feature match. Tyler Anderson versus Isaac Fox. I believe Tyler's playing, is it Prowess
Yes.
versus Isaac on Amulet Titan? And I would assume this is not the first game. Likely Isaac got the first game.
Well,
And
our first 2 games from the Affinity side, the Affinity Boros Energy matchup, did go by extremely quickly. But yes, the Amulet Titan is it Prowess matchup, also a match that is expected to not take too long.
yeah, it's not expecting to take too long. And Tyler's kind of angled this little bit more of a control approach, which the Is It Prowse deck is occasionally, known to do in the post board games. Just playing a land, saying go, holding up what I believe was a Spell Pierce for the Amulet of Vigor, and kind of got to be more the ideal start. This Amulet Titan deck is really fast, and with the Prowess deck, I think to be racing them effectively, you need to be interacting.
Yeah, and as we jump in, where in the turn are we? We see Tyler fetching a Thundering Falls right now.
It looks like a main phase surveil. I'm curious what the reasoning behind that one is.
Yeah, that is interesting. It could affect potentially what. Oh, for the Mishra's
Oh, the
Bauble, he wants to look for another piece of interaction for Isaac's turn, maybe looking for a consign. And he wants to be able to get that surveil before he draws to make sure that he has another one, as we do see that Isaac has another Amulet of Vigor in hand, and we'll see if Tyler did draw another answer to it.
you gotta hope so, because Tyler's hand, it doesn't have any pressure, so you've got to hope you have answers and the right answers, because that Amulet of Vigor is going to be coming down very soon, and there's not a lot of pressure. The clock that Tyler's presenting is effectively non-existent at this point.
But we see Isaac just plays Bojuka Bog, exiles the graveyard immediately before even casting the amulet, and that leads me to think that he won't cast it this turn.
Yeah, Isaac has the read that Tyler has answers, and Tyler knows that there's not really a way to develop the board proactively at instant speed, so you are kind of burning one of Tyler's mana here, which that is a Prowess deck really sometimes choked on. So that's a very interesting play from Isaac, and we'll see if he's deciding that I'd want to waste one of both of our manas, and that's going to be an effective strategy. We'll see how it works out.
Yeah, absolutely. Very heads up play. The amulet deck is much better at dealing with at burning, like that trade of burn one of your mana for burn one of the Is It Prowess mana is quite wise, as the Prowess deck really needs to use all of its mana every turn. As we see, Tyler taps out immediately. He goes, I need to start deploying my threats. Isaac now can safely deploy the amulet. And on the turn that amulet is going off, it can produce so much mana that that spending one on the amulet first is not too much of a cost. So that amulet deck in its current iteration is much better at being able to hold its amulets for the right moment. And that's why it is, been doing so well is that additional ability. Letting it sandbag the amulets is helping it in these post board games immensely.
Yeah, and here we're looking at Tyler, only 2 cards in hand. You got to hope that one of those is an expressive iteration, and you've got to expect that there's no interaction there. So it's got to be something proactive because it'd be tough to imagine wanting to just hold up the Monastery Mentor. Isaac with the Green Suns for X equals 2. What do you think? What do you think he's going to get with that one?
It might just be Aftermath Analyst.
Yeah, a card that's normally just fully involved in these loops, and that's why it's in the deck. But it is a target, it is a blocker, and it is a threat. If a few meaningful lands are milled over, that's a card that must be answered
Yeah,
immediately by Tyler, or else the game will probably end.
if Isaac has a Primeval Titan in hand and not too much to bridge to it, Aftermath looking for if it can mill over a bounce land, that's one way to actually establish his mana. This is the way that Aftermath Analyst was mostly used in Standard in that Teamer Analyst deck, if for those of you who play that Standard format. But yeah, in Amulet it takes on a different role completely as a combo piece, but in this type of game where post-board game we got more interaction, it's not just pure combo piece, it's being used as a value card, which you love to see.
Yeah, you're getting, all parts of the card. 3 cards milled. I'm seeing what looks like
Simic Growth
escape.
Chamber
Is that a
in
Simic
there.
Growth Changer or Escape Shift? As that
Oh,
second card.
well, I think it's a Dismember, a Primeval Titan, and then, yeah, an alt art, either a Growth Chamber or a Scape Shift. And
And
that is a
that is a big difference. And we're kind of, if you're Tyler, you're hoping that you are able to apply enough pressure to either force Isaac to have it next turn, maybe force out a chump block. I'm seeing an Unholy Heat in Tyler's hand. Maybe you're, but with that Bajuka Bog, you are not remotely close to Delirium.
yeah, it's going to be an uphill battle from here for Tyler.
And we are here to off to back to their main feature match. Riley with a Malta 6 and not the fastest start. The Affinity deck oftentimes sandbags on turn 1 to do a really powerful turn 2. So we'll see if that was what's going on. But very, very different start from we saw from Riley in the first game. And when you're on the play, you can afford to have sometimes these slower, more posturing draws. You can see a Force of Negation in Riley's hand. So this is really kind of angling to this more mid-range strategy post board.
Yeah, the Mishra's Bauble being cast and then cycled on turn 1 really does indicate that Riley is not going to try and explode onto the board, but play more controlling. Here, Engineered Explosives played on 1 to answer that Guide of Souls, Urza's Saga coming down. So yeah, we can see his game plan, but it's difficult. If Keith has looked for just the most explosive hand possible, then Riley might be able to play the opposite role he did before, where he answers the Boros energy and then takes over with the Urza Saga later on.
And we're looking, I believe I can see one of those whip flares in Riley's hand. And if Keith develops too much into the board this turn, that could be a huge punish. And I really like the play from Riley of going for the Engineer Explosives on 1 if the whip flare's there, because you're kind of incentivizing your opponent to go wide with something like an Ajani, and then you have the perfect punish for that Guide of Souls into a Johnny curve. But you can see maybe Keith is kind of sniffing something out and is kind of maybe go for a bit more of a posturing play.
Wow. Wear Tear, the perfect card. Answering that Urza Saga means that the Boros energy deck is so resilient that um, Keith will be able to fight through even an Engineered Explosives and a Whip Flare and eventually present an impressive board with Flage, perhaps Goblin of Bombardment, one of those types of cards. Force of Negation being cast to protect that Urza Saga. That is huge.
And that is huge, and that is not something that Keith was expecting. I do not think it is, common wisdom. Maybe Riley's deck has a much higher density of blue cards, which makes it more okay to board in this Force of Negation in the matchup. But this is not, I'd say, the most common thing. And Keith is, went from what would be a great curve, and now Riley's drawn what seems like basically the best draw, which is an untapped land, and that's going to allow those contracts to start coming out. And those are very difficult to deal with from Keith's perspective.
Oh, absolutely massive drawing the untapped land. Yeah, those contracts will be real big real soon. And Force of Negation is a card I think has been underrated against Porous Energy for a long time. In other types of decks, I really think, especially when both decks are trying to explode as much as possible, Goblin Bombardment being such a key card, uh, hitting that force of, being able to Force of Negation it is huge, especially, and now Keith getting access to Wrath of the Skies, another good use for Force Negation. But Riley has set up his deck to be able to do this. Very few other Affinity decks would be able to do it. But with those blue legends, those 6 copies of the blue legends, the 4 Thoughtcasts, and the Sink into Stupors replacing lands, he does have enough blue cards to be able to support Force Negation. And Keith, getting his Wear Tear Force Negation here, you might say, oh, he shouldn't have cast it on his turn. He could have played around it on Riley's upkeep, but then he walks right into Metallic Rebuke.
Yeah, Metallic Rebuke is a card that you basically know and is a lot more likely to be still be in the deck post board. And I'm not sure what's on the top of Riley's deck, but he clearly seems to like it as he didn't shuffle away with that Mishra's Bauble. And Keith's looking at Ocelot Pride in hand, which is, Guide Pride is normally one of the most powerful things this Boros Energy deck can do, but it's a lot less impressive into that face-up Engineer Explosives for one.
He might try and deploy it anyway, because if he can force Riley to crack the engineered explosives to take away the board, that's in either this turn or next turn. That is one less construct that he'll create.
Yeah, that could be a really heads-up play from Keith. Seeing what he's developing, looks like that Ajani is going to hit the board, which is another way to diversify the threats that you're seeing against this Engineer Explosives,
And yeah,
but
this is going
could
to be
be
key.
very costly into the Whip Flare if that's what's in Riley's hand.
Well, the Johnny, and if the Ocelot Pride does come down, that'll bring him to 3 energy, which would give him enough energy to put 2+1/+1 counters on the Guide of Souls, which is absolutely critical to avoid getting completely destroyed by the Whip Flare. So we'll see if he does choose to deploy another threat, or perhaps hold up a Galvanic Discharge to kill the construct, because he does have Discharge in hand before the construct gets out of reach of it. So he is tempted. Yes, Keith does pass the turn, holding up that galvanic discharge to be able to kill one of those constructs before it becomes too big. But this is going to cost him. It plays into the whip flare, unfortunately.
Yeah, it plays very much into the Whip Flare. The only kind of, I guess, small saving grace from Keith is that assuming that Riley's forced to cast the Whip Flare next turn, very unlikely that a construct can also come down. It's going to need a land plus some form of free mana, which doesn't seem like something that Riley can. Or actually, only Riley just needs one land away from that, so that's not even that unlikely. And that would be, a huge play to be able to make a construct and cast the Whip Flare. But it's unclear that's something that is an option to him.
Well, it might be difficult to. Can you explain how he would, when one land would be able to get him to that point?
Yeah, well, you can go make a construct, and then last trigger the Urza Saga will then go search up a Mox Opal, and then you can go land. You have a construct, an Engineer Explosives Mox Opal, tap that one for mana, and that would be enough to do it all, and that would be a huge draw. Seeing Whip Flare, Metallic Rebuke, this is a huge draw step for Riley, and I didn't get a chance to see it.
It looks like an artifact to me, but we could be wrong. Thinking on that chapter 3, uh, Riley, if he does not draw a land, he could choose to forgo the construct, because this board does need to be whip flared. If he just creates a construct, passes the turn, then that Johnny could get out of control really fast. But he does choose to make the construct. Maybe that means he drew a land, or he thinks that um, if the mock gets a Mox Opal, he can hold up Metallic Rebuke for Keith's turn, and that could be enough to um, prevent Keith's further development, so that the Whip Flare on the next turn will be good enough to win.
Yeah, we'll have to see. This is getting to a really. These feel like this next turn or two is going to decide who advances to top 8. This is a incredibly close spot. We have to see with that last card Riley drew. The Mox Opal's in play. As Liam said, Metallic Rebuke is available. If Keith's able to maybe take an artifact away, that shuts off a lot of mana potential from Riley. But we'll have to see what this last card is.
Yeah, that construct being a 3/3, so another discharge, and it was a land. It looks
It's
like
a Steam Vents. Oh my god.
that is
That
huge.
and now if you're Keith, you can just see him. That is not a full look of resignation, but just has to be the worst possible turn. At least you get one turn of development without having the chance of getting Metallic Rebuked is the one reprieve for Keith, but this is getting to be a pretty tough spot.
He needs a flage. He needs a flage.
I would say the only thing that if you're a Keith Capstick fan out there, I know there are many that is going for his favor here is that he has a lot of cards in hand. Riley has one card in hand. We know it's a Metallic Rebuke, which is powerful but is not proactive, and that construct it's only a 3/3.
That's true. That's why Flage would be the perfect answer, removing both the construct and setting up a threat for later. But it looks like it's just more cheap creatures. But into the face-up engineered explosives, it does have the diversity of mana values to produce that Keith will be able to fight through this construct or not.
Yeah, it's you can see Keith's trying to calculate out he wants to put enough things to force the engineer explosives to get popped. It also shrinks the construct size. Maybe forces Riley to make some awkward plays. You can see a Guide of Souls and an
Guide
Ocelot Pride in
Pride.
hand.
Yeah.
Tough to develop both those. I think an Ajani as well. So maybe he's gonna play the Ajani and deciding which of the one drops he wants to pair with it.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to just deploy one of them, use that Arid Mesa to surveil, but he might throw out all of them into the board, as that would 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It would not get him to the city's blessing. So he does choose to just looks like he's going to go for a surveil land here. We're not sure. He
Yeah,
decides. But if going Guide Pride Johnny would get him to the city's blessing, then engineered explosives doesn't matter anymore. There would be so many tokens in play that it could block a construct, trade with a construct, flip the Ajani, fight through it quite easily.
yeah. I believe the Guide Pride of Johnny is one off. Here, there's kind of an interesting spot for Keith. So you see him put the lightning bolt into the graveyard, answers the construct now, but doesn't expect it to answer future constructs, not knowing that Riley's got this counterspell in hand and potentially has to get rid of. He chooses to go with the Guide of Souls into the Ajani. Kind of an interesting spot. There is that kind of little mini game that goes on if he chose to play the Ocelot Pride, because the Engineered Explosives kills the Ocelot Pride. He then now has the opportunity to flip that Ajani if he so chooses. And even in the face of all this removal, you can see just how powerful these threats from Boros Energy are. It seems that Keith has worked himself into a pretty reasonable position, as Riley's hand is just a Metallic Rebuke.
That first land was amazing for Riley, but this second one here is not what he wants to see at all.
And there's a
Thundering
reason this
Falls
affinity deck
already in
plays
play.
nothing. Yeah.
Is it? Yeah, so it won't be able to surveil. He passes the turn back. Keith can go to combat, and if the engineered explosives is not cracked before combat, put the 2/1/1 counters from Guide of Souls onto one of his creatures, start attacking Riley's life total. So Riley might be tempted to stop before that.
And that's a great draw in the face of anything but exactly what Riley has, this Metallic Rebuke. You've got to imagine that there's no better card to counter in the deck than this
There's no
copy of
way it
Voice of
does not get
Victory.
countered. Absolutely no way.
Riley knows he's got a bit of time, can take the chances, taps 3 artifacts, and now it looks like Keith, I believe, has enough energy to jump this Guide of Souls, or jump
Yes,
this cat
exactly. So
token.
threatening to go to combat, attack with just the cat token, give it 2+1/+1 counters and flying, and there we go. He's baited out the engineered explosives activation.
And now this cat token can attack anyways, because the construct, which was we talked about how scary it was, it's only a 2/2.
That's huge, and it cannot be blocked, as that would flip the Ajani and spell doom for Riley. So 2 damage getting in, Ocelot Pride, presumably the follow-up.
And
And
now
this
this
is
both players empty-handed. These next top decks are huge. Keith's got the upper hand here, but really one great top deck. We can see there's 6 lands slash artifacts in play. Riley Hicks could draw a Kappa Cannoneer, something like an Urza Saga would be excellent. But then Keith's deck has a lot of good draws. And if both players brick for a few turns, Riley's life total gets very low very quickly.
That's true. The Ocelot Pride could attack into the construct as a chump attack just to flip that Ajani, because that flip to Ajani is so powerful. It depends on what Keith's draw, whether he'd be willing to make that exchange or not. But if Keith draws well, even a Kappa Cannoneer wouldn't be enough.
And Riley doesn't want to let us know what he drew, but it looks like you got to think that if it was a Kappa Cannoneer or something great, it would have hit the table, and that is not. There are not many good cards that Riley would be wanting passing turn. Maybe it's a counter spell to stop whatever Keith's next play is, but that is not the best sign for Riley here.
No, it could be any of the 0 artifacts that we would want to hold in case we drew a Pinnacle Emissary. But it is unlikely to be one of his best draws, those specifically being Thoughtcast, Emery, Kappa, Pinnacle Emissary, and especially the best one, probably Urza Saga.
And we talk about how Riley's built his affinity deck a lot. It's a very interesting build compared to the, stock affinity list. And he does have a higher density of just good top decks. Most decks are playing weapons manufacturing. That's a horrible top deck in this spot. But Riley's deck's got a lot of powerful ones. But Keith looks like he's got the removal spell. Maybe Riley has a counter spell here.
No,
doesn't look like it.
This will begin the clock for Keith. He can gain a life this turn with that Ocelot Pride, begin accumulating more tokens, and that means that he's not far away from the City's Blessing, but even without the City's Blessing, just one cat a turn means that he will be able to attack for free every single turn, as any blocks would instantly flip that at Johnny and just put Riley massively behind.
And you got to think, if you're Riley, that the next turn is too late. There's only one Whip Flare in the deck, so that is not a draw, and there really aren't many other good draws. Needs a Kappa Canyon or something powerful right here. Otherwise, Keith will be going into the top 8.
Kappa Cannoneer without another artifact. And it's a Urza Saga, which would have been amazing last turn, but might just be too slow at this point.
It is looking like it's going to be. It's not going to get a chance to search anything up. It looks like Keith just drew a land, but that is another 5 damage. Riley going to get dropped down to 4.
Well,
a land would get the City's Blessing. Yeah. Oh, it's not a land. It's Goblin Bombardment!
And that's it! Keith Capstick wins and will advance into the top 8. Wow. What an incredible way to end. And you can see the emotion on his face. Keith, Toronto local, really deserves this win.
And that is, wow. That was an unbelievable top deck for Keith. The spot was looking so good, and you can just see his head's down. This is someone who's wanted it for a while. A lot of close calls. Close calls for the Arena Championship, close calls for the PT. And you can see it set in that Keith Capstick will be attending Pro Tour Lauren Eclipse, but it's not the last you'll see of him this weekend. Keith Capstick is going to be the first or the second seed of our top 8, and we're going to get the opportunity to watch him play some more Magic. And for Riley, you can see as he just de-sideboards his deck, 10-4 is an excellent finish, but it just feels, when you know you're so close, you win that game 1, you feel like you're such in a great spot when you get the Whip Flare and the thing, but just, the Affinity deck, it's got some very explosive draws, but it's got some weak cards, and he'll have to try again at the next one.
How is he feeling right now? Have you been in that spot? I know you've won many win-ins before, but have you lost any?
I've lost win-ins of all sorts, and it doesn't get easier. But it's a really, that's kind of the reason that everyone's here. You see Keith's reaction, the happiness. You only get that level of excitement from these big wins if you take the brunt of those big losses. And that's a well-played event from Riley. I like how he played that match. I think his approach to Findy was very different from what a lot of the ones we were seeing, and it served him well all the way into that last round. But Keith Capstick's Boros Energy deck has brought him into the top 8,